wait until, okay, all right. Need a roll call to order, please.
Mack,
Here?
Braden,
Here.
Nash,
Present.
Albert, absent, LaCroix,
Here.
Miller, absent, Weedman,
Here.
All right, that's quorum. Please join me for the pledge. All right, I need a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay?
Mack,
Aye?
Weedman,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroix,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public comments? Assuming not. All right. Okay, we can go ahead and move on to the board reports, and I can start down with Mrs. Nash, and we can go this way.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Mack. So a couple of items that I would just like to give a shout out to the community for. So the Pride Parade, as you know, was on June 11th. And it was awesome just to be out in the community and see so many people and have the board represented there too, recognizing just how important inclusivity is to our mission and our vision statement, with Dr. G leading the charge. And the the vehicle was an awesome experience, and I didn't have the personal privilege of joining last year because I was traveling. So I just want to give a shout out to PFLAG, the Grays Lake PFLAG organization, and certainly for board colleague Christy Braden for continuing to highlight that for us as a board. Additionally, super beyond measure excited about the first official Juneteenth celebration here in Grays Lake that took place this past Monday on June 19th. The collaboration between our community partners, the Grays Lake Area Public Library, as well as the Grays Lake Heritage Center and Museum, was just outstanding. We had organizations, the Dunn Museum in specific, loan us exhibits to share with our community, and it just shows the amount of impact we can have when we work together and collaborate. So I know as a board, we talk a lot about like consortiums, how do we leverage our intra-governmental agencies to have more efficiencies and impact here in our community and district specifically. And I just think that was a great way and demonstration of seeing how community partners, when they lean in, right, just how tremendous the value we can turn back to our community. So just super excited for that, and all of the volunteers. We had so many volunteers from District 46 schools, neighboring communities in Round Lake come out to support other Lake County organizations, and just wanted to express my gratitude for the engagement of the community and the partnerships displayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash, and I'll add to that. I wanted to thank Mrs. Nash and Mrs. Albert, who's not here this evening, for the organization of that wonderful event, and it was a privilege just to be part of it. I got to stand down the way with a fact that I shared, and what I think I got from it the most was just the ability to continue to talk to people. We just need to take care of each other and talk to each other and make ourselves aware of everything around us. And we got a lot of wonderful comments as people were going by. They enjoyed the walk, they enjoyed the information, the facts, they thought it was a very welcoming event. They found out things and learned things that they didn't know before that brought them to a new level of knowledge, and so congratulations to you both. And I'll add to the participation in the Pride Parade again. I think this is the third one, yes, the third one that we've done, and it's just a wonderfully inviting and warm event. And similarly, I've gotten, and this normally doesn't happen that frequently to me for whatever reason, but I've gotten a lot of emails and comments from neighbors who just really appreciated the fact that they feel safe and that they can share their community with each other. And I think both of those events, we can be together and we can take care of each other. So thank you again, Mrs. Braden, and everybody on PFLAG that put that all together. I also had the CEDAL Governing Board meeting on June 7th, and it was a fairly quick meeting. It was a standard meeting. It was a business meeting and an update on their contract process, which they've done the interest-based bargaining. So they shared that evening, as well as student recognition and the initial preliminary budget, similar to us, for the next governing board meeting coming up in August. So I will have an update on that in August. And I think that's it for me.
I don't have anything except to pile on very briefly that the two events in June, Pride and Juneteenth, were just fantastic to be part of. So it was really fun seeing some of our staff out and about and meeting their families as well. So it's just a really nice opportunity to come together as a community. So thanks to everyone who helped organize.
The only thing I have to report out is through a connection that I loosely have, I've been able to get some retired fire department hose for the district for part of their Alice to-go buckets. So you just have to tell me who to give it to, and I can bring it in and give it to you guys. And so for those to-go buckets, I have about 200 feet of hose. All right. It'll be in your office this week.
None for me tonight, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, Dr. Glickman, we're on to the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you. Well, I too want to thank everyone for those two amazing events of Pride Parade and Juneteenth. The Juneteenth walk, I feel like they were both really symbolic of how special this community is, and how proud I am to be serving in this community. And I really want to point out the unbelievable organization that Ms. Nash and I think you were working also together with Jessica Albert, Ms. Albert, put into the Juneteenth event. If you could have seen the directions, you would know what I'm talking about. They were very specific, and she was just beautifully organized. So thank you for an amazing event, and also thank you to Leslie Armstrong, who's with us tonight, for creating beautiful posters. And I believe you got those posters back. Oh, here we are. Yes. Yes, beautiful posters. So nice. Yeah, they were wonderful. So thank you to everyone for that. And I just want to share some information about the work that the administrative team has been doing just this week. This is very timely information. So our team has been together full days back to back, Tuesday and Wednesday. Luckily, I think we still all like each other. I like everybody. And yesterday we were in here for a full day leadership team meeting. Our focus yesterday was on data, mostly student data. We had a workshop, I'll call it a workshop, led by Amy Gluck. And Amy helped us walk through student achievement data and growth data, really helped us examine how our students performed on a number of assessments as we worked together to create school improvement goals for next year. It was a wonderful day. We have a lot more to do in the weeks to come, but it was a great start for us. And then today, we completely switched gears and had our leadership retreat. And I want to share a little bit about what we did today and kind of the background about how it all happened. So you might remember, board, that last year our team went to the Greenbelt Cultural Center in North Chicago and had a retreat. And we wanted to do the same this summer. And back in October, I was at a workshop with other superintendents learning with actually one of the leading what was he called? Thought leader. He recently was awarded one of the top 200 thought leaders in the United States, a man named Devin C. Hughes. And his focus is on positivity and on how we make moments matter for people and how to create peak moments and how to help onboard people into an organization in a way that helps them to feel valued. At least that's the work that we did with him back in October, along with these other superintendents. And at that time, I was very excited and thought that it would be fantastic to have him for our leadership retreat in North Chicago. However, there were a couple of hiccups, including the fact that he's a national speaker with national speaker fees. So at that time, I thought, well, let's see if there's another school district that wants to partner with us. And I went back to my Lake County superintendent partners and asked, does anybody want to partner with us? Well, my inbox started filling up with other superintendents, and the result of that was today we had 11 school districts that came together to learn from Mr. Hughes. In truth, we ran a conference today. It wasn't our original plan, but that's what we did. Really in great thanks to Mr. Wildman and Mrs. Gluck, who both had experience in doing that. So other school districts were paying us to bring their administrative teams. We were able to do it at the Cultural Center. If you've never been there, it's beautiful with gorgeous walking paths, and we had a full hour set aside for lunch and walks, which is why some of us look the way we do today, a little more casual than usual, a little more summery, as someone told me. So we had a beautiful day, and we learned from each other and from Mr. Hughes and from other school districts, which was just really superb. So it was a great day. And that's it for the superintendent's report.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Glickman. We have, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening, including the personnel addendum that was sent to us earlier this evening, and then also removing the treasurer's report for this evening, which will be given to us in July.
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
Braden,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. On to action items for this evening. We have a motion to approve the following board policies, and you need me to read each of these, correct? I have to read them? Or no? Okay. Just a motion to approve the board policies as listed in the agenda for this evening.
I'll move.
I'll second. Dr. Beck, will you remind me, these are policies that were in committee 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, that's right. That's right.
If there are any policies, though, that you'd like specific information on, we can certainly provide it. Okay.
I do, Dr. Glickman.
Okay, great.
And I just wanted to make sure I was processing this right. So I know with press policy 4:60 around purchase and contracts, and I believe they I feel like adjacent to 470 around conservation and recycling. So I just want to make sure that while this may be the language in the policy, to continuously encourage our board to make sure that, we're having, an inclusive perspective as it pertains to procurement practices. So I know the verbiage reads, right, like lowest cost with consideration for service reliability, delivery prompt, et cetera. And I'd almost want us to just make sure we're shifting more to a total cost mindset, because while we might get like the big branded entity to perform a service for us or provide goods, right? And maybe our CSBO would be in a position to kind of help us with forecasting, right? But I just want to challenge us to make sure that while, lowest cost is the practice, right? But is it truly lowest cost, based on like historical experience, how many times something comes back and gets marked up, and now we probably could have went with another supplier in the space, if you will. But because the larger supplier has like the brand, the scale, but then over the long term, they don't end up being the lowest cost supplier.
So I'm wondering, Mr. Wildman, can you respond to that? I know there's a law that's around that, but I'm not sure if that speaks exactly to Mrs. Nash's concern.
I'm going to try.
Yeah.
So I think I've mentioned this before in regarding bidding procedures. If it's a bid, it needs to be the lowest responsible bid, meaning that it hits all the criteria that we wanted as well as being the lowest bid. If it is outside of that and it's more into professional services, we do have the ability to pick on the criteria that we want, which would be the professional service itself. If there is a component which is a multi-year, that would be included in the bid number. So for example, if it was something that was going to be constructed, I'm just giving an example, over 2 years, we would take the total cost into consideration as part of that. And if we were purchasing from a cooperative agreement, that would be listed, as I've done a lot through those Omnia contracts, which we're purchasing a lot of equipment through Train. So as transparent as possible in terms of cooperative pricing, that's there. In terms of the bidding, it really depends on the specifications that we write. So if there is a total cost which is over multi-year, we need to put that in our specifications and make sure that we get that from all the responsible bidders. So there is a component of that that's our responsibility, and if we write our specifications well, we'll get that.
Thank you for that. And to that point, have we ever tracked to see like forecasted versus actualized to make sure that those costs are coming in line with what the lowest cost bid?
So the bid, whatever's presented to the board is what we pay. So the requisition, the purchase order will match exactly to whatever is the contract that is presented to you, whether it's bid or not. If it's through cooperative pricing, we know what that is, and that is what we'll pay the vendor. And if it's through a competitive process, which would be bidding ourselves, that would be the price that we would pay. So in terms of tracking, there is no other payment because we're not legally authorized to pay 1 penny more than that.
Okay. Thank you.
And to the extent you would need to pay more, you'd need to come back to the board, right?
Yes, now we're
Case-
into
Case
change order law,
Durham and
which is
Harbor.
we're allowed to do a 10% change order without coming back to the board. And that's written in the, 460, which is the underlying municipal law that we're drawing from. So a 10% change order, anything greater than 10% we have to bring back to you because it's considered material and significant.
Yet in practice, I think you do come back to the board anyway, don't you?
We do,
Or
yes.
we might not have had that case arise.
We haven't had that case arise, but as a general rule, if a contract is approved by you, the renewal will be approved by you for the following year. I can't think of any specific example that I've brought to you since I've been here that's been a change order within 10%. But if there was, for example, the roof scope was not within what we thought it was going to be, within the contingency and retainage of what we initially agreed, which was brought to you and board approved, we'd have to bring it back to you here to approve it.
Any other questions? I think we can go to vote.
Weedman. Aye. Mack.
Aye.
Nash.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
And LaCroy.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Motion passes. We do not have anything under the unfinished business this evening, so that'll move us directly to the new business, and we'll start with a communications update.
And I'm inviting Leslie Armstrong, our communications coordinator, to share a report with us.
Hello, Board of Education. Good evening. So I'm here to present to you our findings from our recent communications survey and also go over some of the goals that we have been working towards. And as always with our mission, we are cultivating a community through our communications program. Next slide, please. So working from the strategic plan goals, which were set back in 2021-2022 school year, I just wanted to go over some of the milestones that we've achieved. The district and school mascots and logos were put out. We've hired more translators. We have launched the website this year, which was a huge one. We have added web managers in our schools to help with the social media posting and the web postings in the individual buildings. We have an initial community engagement committee web presence that we are working on and hoping to flesh out further. And then we've recently completed this community survey. Next slide, please. So in 2021, we audited the community regarding the district's social media and communications preferences as part of that rebranding campaign for the logo. And then just recently in 2023, we surveyed the community again regarding district social media and other communication preferences to build future action steps. The survey was open to all staff and community members, and we received 110 responses. 102 were parent and guardians, 10 staff members, and then 2 community members with no children in D46 schools. This slide just shows some demographics, which schools these folks attended. Meadowview School was the highest, and Frederick School. We did ask if they speak another language outside of the home. And then how do you access your information? This was something that we did ask back in 2021, and we are definitely seeing a shift to smartphones. So more and more people are accessing that information on their phones rather than on a desktop computer where you see a nice, big, beautiful website. Now you're just seeing what you see on your phone. And then we asked, how did you prefer to be contacted for non-emergencies? Email, right up there. That's where people want to be. And text messages were also very high. Which methods of communication have you viewed or listened to over the past month? Email, again, is where people are. The automated phone messages that we've been putting out directing people to the website was also indicated. How satisfied are you with the frequency of communications? 1 being not satisfied and 5 being very satisfied. And that's the range for most of these questions going forward. And most people are satisfied with our frequency. And then how satisfied are you with the quality of information shared by the district? Again, we are rated very, very high. And then we asked if they had participated in a thought exchange, which was very good to see. Almost 70% said yes, that they had participated. And the next slide was whether or not they found the thought exchange process helpful in providing feedback or understanding the thoughts of the community. And the majority of the respondents did reply in the positive that yes, or maybe they thought that did provide the feedback. How often do you visit the district website? Most people are weekly or occasionally, and I'm the only one, I think, that does visit more than once a day. How would you rate the ease of use of the district website? This one was a little more interesting in that we are seeing some people are having a little bit of trouble with some of the navigation, which we'll discuss a little bit later. And then where do you get most of your school news and information? We asked, we were looking for information on where are they getting that information from the website? Are they getting it from the newsletters? Are they getting it from teacher newsletters? We had a couple word of mouth, or your child was providing that information. And then for school communications, we were asking again, how often do you read the school newsletter? That was a biggie. How helpful is the information in the school newsletter? Again, that's very good information we're putting out. How do you prefer to receive the school newsletter? And this I was looking for whether people were going to the website looking for that information or if they're just getting it out of their email, and most of them are just using the email. How often do you visit your child's school website? Again, occasionally, some weekly, me more than once. How informed are you about school events and activities? This was very positive to see. How easy is it to find information on the school website? And again, we're seeing the same kind of curve where there are some issues, I think, with navigation on the website. Do you feel you receive information or feedback from your child's teacher in a timely manner? And again, this was mostly positive. And what topics would you like to learn more about? We asked this a number of years ago as well in a survey, and curriculum always comes out on top. Extracurricular activities people are looking for information on, also assessments, and we're seeing school safety and protection coming up. And then regarding our social media, we asked which platforms they regularly use. This was kind of a surprise. We're seeing most people on Twitter or on Facebook, and very few on Twitter. That is not growing as much as we were seeing in the past. And again, obviously there's issues going on with Twitter that may be influencing that. We are seeing a big increase in Instagram, which is something we are going to address as well. Instagram we started in 2015, and during COVID that kind of dropped off for us, so it's now picking back up, and we will get that back on the radar. Oh, can you go back one, Brandon? We also noticed that not active on social media was 25%. So out of the 100 people that responded to the survey, that was a pretty big indicator that they're not even on social media. How satisfied are you with the quality of communications from the district's social media account? Relatively satisfied. How satisfied are you with the quality of communications from your school's social media accounts? Also relatively satisfied. And this is kind of big because this was the first year that we had any school social media going on. We've had the pages set aside for them for probably a decade, but with the school media managers coming on board, we're just starting to see those pages starting to build. How satisfied are you with the frequency of posts from the district's social media accounts? Again, I think they're just kind of in the middle of the road here. And how satisfied are you with the frequency of posts from your school's social media accounts? And then additional thoughts we've had. The major takeaways, again, we see the move from mobile phone to mobile phone usage from desktop computers. Facebook is where our people tend to be that are on social media, although Instagram was a big surprise to me to see how much and how quickly that is growing. The community does not like the non-emergency robocalls. That was a biggie. So, the community would rather receive email, text messages for their non-emergency communications. The thought exchange program is beneficial, so we did want to make sure that that was something that the people wanted to continue to use. The most used areas of the website are the calendar, the menus, and our news. Those are the things I get asked questions about continually is, where are the menus? Where's the food? Consistent schools newsletters are desired. And community engagement, expanded pages with volunteer opportunities. That's something I was reading in the comments that people were putting in, that they are looking for that information for how to get involved. So our next steps, we're going to shift away from the message from the superintendent that we've been putting out to more of a district-wide electronic newsletter format, which will have sections from teaching and learning and finance and technology, and we will put together that information and make that a standard that we do going forward. Intentional communications to the community regarding the fiscal and facility needs of the district. So we want to make sure we're starting to send some information so people are understanding what we're doing here. Continuation of the staff and student celebrations through media. So whether that's a podcast or videos or some other way that we can continue to highlight the teachers and the staff and the students that we have in District 46. And then creation of short instructional videos on how to navigate the website. So this is something that I think, people are asking me, where's the calendar? And there's a link right on the front. So I think people are just not knowing that that's where it is and just overlooking. And I think if we create some short videos to just kind of show people how the navigation works and how to find things, we'll push those out periodically throughout the year to get people more involved with the website. And then also the creation of a communications planning calendar. That's something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, so that will really help us in making a fuller picture of what's going on in the district to be able to plan some things more in advance. Continued work with the web managers to further expand school news and social media posts. We made a great start this year with them. There are some that we still need to get into the other social media, Instagram or Twitter accounts, so that work will continue. The increase in Instagram presence, we are definitely going to make a push for. And then we'll be refining the news and newsletter processes across the district. So we're going to look at some different way that will make things easier for principals to be getting that school news out to their community. Questions?
I actually do. For the Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook posts, are they all linked together? Like, do you send it through one and it goes to all three?
They are not, and I'll tell you why. Because the way that you post in different social media platforms does make a difference in how those posts are received and how they are showing up in people's accounts. So, you know, to do a Twitter, generally the way that I do things is I write out the Facebook post, the long Facebook post, and then I take that, put it into Twitter, and modify it down to fit within the format of Twitter, and then go into Instagram with that as a third option. So basically I start with Facebook, go to Twitter, go to Instagram. If you were to start at Twitter and do a Twitter with your hashtags and this and that, that doesn't really translate as well into Facebook because those hashtags don't really mean much in Facebook. It's just a different way to do it. So I tend to do them individually.
Okay.
Well, this was awesome. So thank you so much for just the due diligence and the effort you put into making our technology just more engaging and interactive. When you were talking about doing some videos, you know, I thought about it. I'm like, well, they probably won't find the links to the videos either. So what came to mind was sometimes when I go to a site for the first time, it almost is like a forced stop, and it requires you to take a tour. So maybe we could use some tour functionality, so as soon as they get there, right, then it calls out all of those big things up front, so this way you're not building a bunch of videos that may end up being under visualized anyway. Just a thought.
Yeah, good thought. Thank you.
But nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leslie. And I wanted to share not a question, but a comment too about the cell phone use. Mm-hmm. That seems to be also, at least what I've observed, happening as well as a preferred choice for students to do their work on as well. So I'll have students who will turn in assignments that they have typed on the cell phone. Now, when we do a video assignment or whatever, then I can see them going to that multimedia use, which is great, but I had 2 or 3 students this past year who were turning their essays, and I see them sitting, typing their essays on the mobile version of Google Docs or whatever. And it's fascinating to me that you're seeing the same thing on the parent side too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for the update. It's really, really good.
Great. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a couple comments. Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie. Board, we're really excited about doing this district-wide newsletter so that, honestly, information is not being funneled through me, but that our community is hearing directly from each department about what's happening in the school district. So we're really excited about that. I am personally excited to stop having people constantly stop me in the community and say, oh, I recognize your voice from those robocalls, which I hate. So we're working on what that's going to look like, but we're glad to stop that. And then I wanted just to mention that at the beginning of Leslie's excellent presentation, you saw the goal map, right? The strategic goal map. At our next board meeting, our cabinet will be providing you with an update of all of the strategic goals and what the action steps are for the 23-24 school year. So many of the action steps that Leslie outlined tonight will be on the new map for the next year, but we wanted you to have this presentation first so that you'd have a chance to see what all of the results were of the survey and kind of know a little bit more about what's feeding those action steps. All right, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't realize that. Okay. First of all, and it was 2 years ago that we did this. It seems like a longer time ago and also like yesterday. But this is exactly the kind of attention and care and feeding of this topic that I was envisioning back then when we realized we had a deficit in our communications. So thank you for filling this and filling it nicely. It's very nice, very well done. I did have a question about one of the next steps, and it was creating a planning calendar. So I'm just curious, so I know what a planning calendar means for me in the job that I do, but from a communications point of view, are you talking about contemplating communications campaigns? Are you talking about more of the internal functioning of the communications function in the school, or both, or any of it? If you could just elucidate a little bit more on that piece, I'd appreciate it.
Kind of both. Mainly, we've been very reactive to, as I find things out in the buildings, oh, I need to be over here doing this. So I've not had the time previously to be able to map that out as far as this is happening and these are the things that are happening in September, these are the things that are happening in October, and being able to see where we need to be and what kind of information we need to be putting out. It's just been very, very much at the moment of I need to put something out now, and I would like to have a little bit of preparation to put things out and be able to put more thought into what we're doing and be more deliberate in what we're doing.
So it sounds like you're planning out, you're trying to get a pre-read on the things that are happening at the different schools and things you might want to communicate out so you can give some forethought to those things.
Yes.
Is there any part or any place in this planning cycle for things like, a 3-year review of the website or things, you know what I mean? Like things like that. I'm not sure if that's a good example, but those kinds of activities.
Right, they should be in there as well. Yeah,
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that one of the conversations that Leslie and I have been having about the frequency of our communications and how we plan those communications is that for such a long time, we had to be reactive because of COVID, right? So things would happen outside of the school district that we had to react to and to communicate with our stakeholders about. Now, we are able to be much more planful about those communications, and that's really a pleasure. And it allows us to slow down and think through our next steps.
Thank you. All right, the next item on new business is meeting the student needs report. That is Mrs. Gluck. And Dr. Diaz, okay.
Good evening. We are here today to talk to you about meeting the needs of all learners. So this really goes with all 3 of these parts of our mission statement. So really talking about, 1, how are we empowering our learners throughout many different aspects of their education, how we are creating equity for all of our students, and then also cultivating our community. So there are 3 things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about newcomer requirements and supports in our district. We're going to talk about intervention, and then we're going to also talk about extension acceleration. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Diaz to start us off.
All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So we are going to do a quick historical look at our newcomers from the past 10 years in our district. And so as of today, we have 62 different languages in our district. So we've gone from 54 to 62 down, but 164 are still represented in Illinois. So getting closer. All right. The presentation is broken up into 3 parts. So it's basically what is the state asking of us, what are we doing, and then what are potential future next steps or things and considerations that we're looking for. So state parameters You're fine. Next slide, please, is fine. Thank you. Is basically we have board policy and we have Title III federal funding that kind of governs over newcomers. And we're going to talk about newcomers and also refugees and asylees. And you can be a refugee and asylee who's also a newcomer, but not all newcomers are refugees and asylees, right? So we're going to talk kind of about that. So we have the education of homeless children, board policies 7, goal, and 10, equal education opportunities, and then we have federal and state legislation. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, Title III. So that is Article C14 under the bilingual area and newcomers ML, etc. And so basically, you are considered a newcomer for 3 years. So the minute you come into the United States country, you have 3 years where the state gives you this grace period to becoming a newcomer. And then last year, I don't know if you remember, we did that activity where we were doing the endless language. That is someone who, in that activity, simulated someone who has been in the country for 3 years. So that's about the language that they had, social and academic, which is why the state gives you such a long pattern to have language, or such a long time for language acquisition. Okay, the state also asks if you can please have native language instruction. And so even if we have students who speak Sabo or we have students who speak Russian, we do have to provide some sort of native language instruction. So it's either through interpretation, it's through native language books. We have a couple of different types of programs that have access to students being able to listen to their native language being read at their level. So we also were able to do a narrative report card. So instead of kind of going off script from the traditional report card, we can actually say students came in to the United States, they joined our school district here, they knew this many letters, they could say these many things. The grading period, what did they improve upon? And so you can have a written report card for 3 years. And then the other thing that's interesting to point out and sometimes overlooked is that we can have newcomers who speak English. So we do have students from Canada, we have students from England, we have students from South Africa. Of course, they're newcomers still, so they get different types of funding and supports, but they might not need ML services. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, and then for the state code, we also have a parent orientation. So what we have put together are different folders per school, so they're color-coded. And if you are just registering, or an ML student, new to the country, you make it like a purple folder for Prairie View. And if you open it, you'll have color pictures of this is your principal, here's some key phrases, survival English, this is your EL teacher. Here's a survey in 9 different languages. How can we help you? What kind of supports do you need? Are you looking forward to coming to school? What are your students' kind of like strengths? So we get to know the student, we get to know the parents, and then what we are going to do next year is have orientation once a trimester, because we're pretty good about the beginning of the year. Anyone who's already registered, yes, we know, yeah, we can come in these 5 times to have a tour of your school. But if it's November, et cetera, we're not so good about giving the parents the tour. So we're doing it once a trimester. And then we also provide field trips. And so we took 2. So all of our newcomers went on 2 field trips this year. One was to a Ukrainian market in the Chicago Botanical Gardens. The students who are refugees from Ukraine and also Russia said that they miss the food the most. And so we were able to find a bakery that put together some savory and sweet pastries that were from, very authentic to their country, and they were very excited to have that. It was a nice thing. And then we went to see a play, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And then we also have the Newcomer Curriculum Council. So it's a district level committee, and basically we meet bi-monthly, and we really focus on who our students are. Who are our newcomers this month? How are we helping them? What grants are there? What supports can we provide? What curriculum do they need? Next slide, please. Thank you. So then one of the very first things we did this year in the Newcomer Curriculum Council is we kind of went to the 2 best places, ISB and Center of Applied Linguistics, CAL. And we looked at, well, what are their different definitions for a newcomer, refugee, and asylee? And then make sure that we understood the differences, and then how do we make that known in our department, and what kind of services and supports are afforded to each group. And so basically a refugee and an asylee is still a person who is seeking refuge in the United States, but it just depends on where they filled out their papers. So if they filed when they came to the United States, they're an asylee. If they filed for help and to come into the United States, for petition to come into the United States from their home country, they're a refugee. So basically that's the only difference. And then a newcomer is anyone who has been in the country for 3 years or less. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here are some of our trends. So in 2014, we had 45 newcomers, and basically all 45, I think it's like 42, spoke Spanish. And now in 2023, we have 52 newcomers. but we have like 15 different languages that are represented. So that is the difference. So yeah, it's only 13 people, right? But it's a very, very big difference between, okay, we can have bilingual support, we can have a Spanish speaking interpreter in this school, we can help you, we can communicate with all the parents, to now, okay, 52 students and a plethora of languages. So next slide, please. Thank you. And then for high incidence languages, this is a shift from the last time that I presented that. So English is obviously still the #1 language spoken in our district, followed by Spanish, but Tagalog is second, and Polish and Russian and Hindi are switching ranks, if you will. So I just want to look at that for a minute. Please. Okay, thank you. All right. So as of June, these are our numbers. So we have 13 refugees and asylees from the countries listed on the side: Cambodia, Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine, and Germany. It's not that common that you have refugees from Germany. We think that it was a stop along the way, but enough to gain kind of some residency before they came over. And then we have 52 total newcomers. Thank you. Next slide, please. And then we were wanting to look at, well, who is getting additional support, either by an interpreter that is a contracted service or an interpreter who is in district. And so it's just basically broken out by school, how many interpreters, what languages, and then if they're purchase service or if they're ours. And so we have a Mongolian, Russian, Ukrainian, we have a Spanish, and we have an Urdu interpreter in various schools. Thank you. All right. So then we focus on, well, okay, what kind of supports can they receive, and how can we fund that? So the McKinney-Vento really does provide a lot of support for refugees and asylees. We were actually able to get funding through the Regional Office of Education as well. They provided Target gift cards for each one of our students, and we were able to basically buy anything. They gave the parameter that it had to be an academic need, a social need, or a basic need. And so one of our 4th grade students really, really wanted like a stuffed animal, so I went and got that. Other students really they needed a lot of food. So we were able to use the money any way that we wanted. We submitted the receipts to back to the ROE, and everything was fine. We also had ESSER ARP money. We had $11,641. We used most of that already this year. Title III. So we have money from that. And then we were a late entry, or I guess we were a late qualifier for our immigrant education program, because in September they're like, no, you didn't qualify, but in November we did. And so we were able to earn $7,600 from the state federal funding to use any way we can to support our newcomers, which is pretty neat. And then the foundation was very gracious. I applied for a grant to help specifically all of our newcomer families, and they awarded $1,000 for us for the upcoming school year. So very thankful for that. And then we have local EVF funding as well. Thank you. So what are we doing for our students? This is what we have in place. Thank you. We have the Newcomer Curriculum Council. We meet bi-monthly, and they work in between the weeks as well, just to make sure that we're moving forward, greeting parents, answering all the questions, doing anything that we need, shopping on weekends. And then we have a whole more, I guess, curriculum resources. We used to just have Language Launch, which is a really good native language. It's basically survival English, but it really was better for like 5th through 8th grade students. So we're like, okay, that meets some of our needs, but not all of them. What could we do? So we did a big curriculum search and ended up with purchasing some Voyager books, Rosetta Stone, but like actually it's a CD or it's a online program, but then they also have workbooks that go next to it, and then Sail and Soar, and that's by Vista. That one we're most excited about. Sail and Soar is for younger students, and then Sail is for younger students, and Soar goes all the way up to 8th grade. And it's very contextual language. Thank you. All right, we have an interpreter for 2 weeks, and it's renewed based on need for anyone who is new to the country. So the Mongolian interpreter, for example, stayed with our 2 students, because of brother-sister, for 2 full weeks, and then we realized where they were needed, and the interpreter only came for the classes that were really needed. And then we began to look at the need for a newcomer center, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Focus on best practice for curriculum resources. I did a lot of research with ISB, other directors, to try to figure out, what are you doing also? What else do you have? What supports do you have? And then that's how we ended up with Sail and Soar. And then parent and student orientation. Thank you. So when I looked into newcomer centers, like, okay, what is a newcomer center, when it might be a good idea to kind of start talking about that or thinking about it. And this was some data that we pulled. So Arlington Heights has 51 newcomers, and they have a newcomer center where students attend for at least one full year. And this curriculum is like off script, right? It's a survival English, it's getting used to the United States, go outside when it's raining, go outside when it's snowing, you have a buddy for lunch, you're learning all of the nomenclature, all the things that you can't really be taught, right, inside a United States school. And so they're there for at least one full year, and then they would transition to their general homeschool. High school districts seem to also have a 1 or 2 year program. There's a lot more newcomer centers for high school, and I think that comes just into content. If I just came from Mongolia and I'm in 8th grade and I'm asked to read native language English text at 8th grade level, and I don't really have any scaffolding, that's very difficult. So 60 students in that particular high school go to a 1 or 2 year program. They build on their native language, they build on English, and then they transition back to their high school. Same with Mount Prospect, and then Aurora Public Schools has a combined welcome center, and it's a 3-year transition, but it's only for very specific things. So if you're a younger student, you're there for maybe like 75% of the day. If you're an older student, you're there for like 15%. You go for one class, and then you go back to your home school. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then I looked at what other peer districts are doing. So Lake, Cook, McHenry, and Kane counties have a variety of things. We're doing most of them. They have translations, they have technology, live telephonic interpreters, they have maybe AI technology to translate while the teacher is speaking. They have a lot of parent volunteers who come in and then they just happen to speak Hindi, so then they're in the class. Contracted interpreters, and then homeschool liaisons. Thank you. Next slide, please. Continuing with that, Ukrainian and Russian interpreters are being offered through 2 companies. We have LARC and we have ILS. They offer phone translations and phone interpretation and translation services for free this year, and they're going to redo that next year. They're re-upping their grant, which is very, very nice. And then on-site interpretation is billed through, it's basically an unfunded mandate. And ISB is working with Russian and Polish and Ukrainian interpreters to see if they can kind of just house them, and then we can call in or send documents, and it would be free. So, thank you. So what are some recommendations or next steps or considerations for the future? They would be to potentially, and we kind of have moved a little bit on this, to move to have more paras, like 5 additional paraprofessionals in class instead of having contracted interpreters. So we are working on hiring and contracting. And then the consideration for in the future a newcomer center. We're getting up there with our newcomer numbers. Does that make sense? Just some things to consider. And then different types of technology so that we don't really have one math class. And this is the class I've spoken about a few times. In Frederick, we had 5 different interpreters in 5 different languages. Plus you have the teacher speaking in English. So you have 6 languages in one class. We affectionately call it the United Nations. That's very difficult for the teacher or the other students who do not need to hear how to do a math problem in 6 different languages before they get to work on it. So how can we make that better next year? Thank you. And then potential site visits to these 3 districts. Arlington Heights, Naperville, and Waukegan, they have the Welcome Center just to sort of see how does that look like? What do you do? How can we, what kind of clues or ideas can we take from there maybe and implement here without necessarily constructing or creating a center? And then the final thought is need for more advocacy. ISB, EdRed, many state representatives are really focusing on everyone has a lot of refugees and asylees, especially from Russia and Ukraine and Venezuela. How can we help? What else can we do? We want to make sure that we're meeting the students where they are, but there isn't necessarily, we don't know the best thing, so they're involved. And the Refugee Coalition just came out with a whole bunch of resources as well, so I'm keeping up on the investigation. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
You know, I'm just thinking before Mrs. Luck speaks, I'm wondering if board members have questions for Dr. Diaz, because we're going to veer away from, So does anyone have questions for Dr. Diaz?
I'm kind of interested in your newcomer center, right? Do you then group children based on a couple of grades together, like
Yes.
1 through 4 or whatever
Yes,
it is,
it
right?
would be
And
a
just
3
concentrate on what they need.
Exactly. Yes. The biggest grade band we can have multi-ages of 3 years. The state doesn't allow anything past that. So kinder first, second could be together, but yes, grade bands, multi-age.
Okay. And then, this is kind of an aside, as I was sitting here thinking how, like a small project would be for like art or whatever, is to have a display in the school of what nationalities are actually in the school. You know, they can put their, either a flag up or
Yes.
a colored in map or saying this is where I came from, and or
Very
a pin in
cool.
a map or something like that. It'd be kind of cool to have on a, I don't know, almost like a
Yes.
permanent type of display that
That'd
can
be
be
awesome.
changed based on the student population, but
Yeah,
that was just an
It's
aside.
a lovely
I
idea,
appreciate
and I
that.
think a number of your colleagues are pointing behind you, because if you turn your head, well, no, it's not the, but it's the welcome, that welcome poster that Dr. Diaz had made for us actually is specific to the languages that we have in our school district. So, kind of related to what you were saying.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh.
If you really like it, there's also one over there behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a question, but again, I have a comment about just kind of wow, because it's another testament to a place where families and students know that they have value when they come here, and that we're honoring that value. And it's not just a situation of you come here and you need to, go into the academics right away, right? It's a cultural outreach, and it also, helps us share and continue to take care of each other. So it's really neat.
I remembered my
Yeah,
my,
Molly.
I don't know what it is. I was thinking about how the unfunded mandate plays in, and then I know there were some state representatives who were trying to get additional funding for newcomers this year and didn't quite go.
Right.
So, maybe we can all make sure we find opportunities for advocacy. I was thinking about Ed Red is having a legislative breakfast again in August. I'll be out of town, I'll be on vacation, but great opportunity to, maybe it's IASB, I'll have to look at my email, but a couple of us went to the one in the spring, and it was like direct Q&A, and there were 4 or 5 state representatives there, as well as our state senator. And so, what are those opportunities that we can continue to advocate in the next legislative session to make sure that we have funding for this really important work? So thank you for everything you do.
There's just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight before we move on. I know, I promise. We really want to hear from you, Mrs. Gluck, too. So, Board, we wanted to bring this report to you today to hear a few things, just to bring a few things to the forefront. And Dr. Diaz, you did a great job of doing that. We wanted you to hear how many more newcomers we have, right? We wanted you to hear that. We wanted you to hear that need for advocacy, so thank you so much, Mrs. Braden, for bringing that up as well. And then we realized that we have been having conversation about, wow, we're starting to get enough students who are newcomers that other school districts do start looking at newcomer centers, and you'd never heard anything about that. So we wanted you to hear about that now. That is not to state that we are any way ready to make any kind of change like that, but it's a conversation that we're having. It's something we're looking at. You heard Dr. Diaz say, she's going to be spearheading just doing some investigation about that in the future, and we wanted you to know that now.
I just, one more thing to add. I think if you go to the welcome centers, right, if you do make some field trips,
Yes.
it may be worth it to invite some members of the board to go with, because I think there's probably more than enough up here that would be interested to see how that would work and play
Nice.
out. And,
Okay.
it would help you get support.
Or at
Thank
least
you.
report out on the visits. We'd love to hear more about that.
Okay.
And I would like to add too that, thank you for this information. Like, I knew we had newcomers. I didn't understand, what was required of us for newcomers, and I more fully understand that now very well. Thank you. I didn't understand all we were doing for the newcomers and the needs and the challenges we have to provide for the newcomers. So this was fantastic. Thank you.
No, sorry. All right, all right. Did I interrupt you, though? No, this is my second thing. I always feel like we think of things we should submit for the IASB.
Workshops, like the workshop.
No, the resolutions. I think we should. I mean, yeah. The deadline for this year was probably like yesterday because that's how I roll. But maybe we make a list somewhere. Maybe someone has a list. Maybe someone's keeping a list. But I'm thinking this might be an interesting one to put together for a resolution about making sure that we're advocating legislatively for how we welcome newcomers with money. Because all the best intentions in the world, if the state's going to ask us to do these things, which is the right thing, we also need funding to go with it. So maybe somebody's got a list somewhere. So next year, when we're like, should we do any resolutions?
A list. But I don't think we've missed the resolution deadline yet, have we?
It's very close.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
got it.
it may have been this week.
Or maybe somebody else has written it and then we'll be supportive of it.
We
It's
absolutely
another
will.
option.
All right. Thank you.
Not at all. It's just one of those things when you're thinking about it, like what should we submit? You can't come up with anything, and then a week after, you're like,
Yes. All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're still talking about meeting the needs of our students, but we're going to talk about how do we do that through intervention and extension. So I want to start just by defining a couple of terms that you've probably heard thrown around, and it really frames everything I'm going to be talking about. So you may have heard MTSS. MTSS means multi-tiered system of support. And what that really is that is just a formal name for a process that we use in order to ensure that we're reaching every child in every school every day. It really, and I'll explain that in a little bit more, but it has layers of intervention that are embedded into that to address both group and individual student academic needs as well as behavioral needs. So embedded into that is response to intervention, or RTI, which has been around for quite some time at this point. And that is really embedded under the umbrella of MTSS. And that's where it's a process, that we go through in order to provide really specific supports for our students when they need tier 2 or tier 3, which means more time and intensity than what they're getting at tier 1. And I'm gonna explain what those different tiers are. Moving into this next slide. So this is a pyramid that you can see really anywhere. You can pull up MTSS, RTI, you'll see this pyramid. And this is where we're looking at, so one side of this is academic, one side is behavior. And when you're looking at that green part, that's what typically 80 to 90% of your students are getting. So that's all of your tier 1 instruction. That's where all of our students are getting. It's preventative, it's proactive, it's our core instruction, it's all of our PBIS that we're doing within our classrooms and within our buildings. And so that's really where we're hitting most of our students, right? When you get to this 5 or 10% of your students who are a targeted group that maybe are at risk or struggling a little bit, needing some more support, either on that academic side or the behavioral side, that's where that tier 2 is. And then it gets even more intensive for individual intervention, and it's usually about 1 to 5% of students where we're looking at it more it's more individualized for individual students, and then this is all proactive before we would refer students for special education. So I'm going to talk about this green part first, that big part, that tier 1, and this is really where, so all of the curricular resources we bring to you, all of that fits under tier 1, right? This is where it's school-wide, it's classroom-wide, and it's what all of our students are receiving. When we're talking about universal screening of all students, that's why we do NWEA MAP assessment, because that's one of our screeners. It's one of our pieces of data that we can use to then identify, do we need to dig in a little bit further? Do we need to give some more assessments to be able to see how students are performing and be able to be more preventative and proactive for students with their performance. It's also where we provide in-class support, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like on the next slide. So Tier 1 interventions are provided by classroom teachers, and every single one of our schools has within their master schedule, within their school day, an intervention block or an intervention period. The minimum amount of time that any of our schools have is 30 minutes. Most are around 40. And so what that is there's no new instruction happening during that time. Our classroom teachers are reinforcing targeted skills. They're working with students individually. They're working with students in small groups. And that can be based on what they're seeing from that MAP assessment, but also what they're just seeing on a regular basis within the classroom. In addition, what they're working on is there may be, when we talk about targeted skills, there may be foundational skills that we see students are missing. And a teacher can work with students in order to help to provide support in that way. On the behavioral side, we have our school-wide PBIS that I mentioned, and then we're moving to also having the use of SEL coaches in the future to be able to provide some support, some explicit instruction in that area of social emotional learning. So how do we then identify for Tier 2 and Tier 3? So I told you we have those universal screeners. So that MAP assessment is what kind of triggers us to look at, do we need to look at anything further? Typically what we'll look at is we'll look at students that are falling below the 25th percentile. There may be a student, when we look at their data historically, may be kind of up and down, and that we may have some professional conversations to determine we still want to screen further. And what we use is another nationally normed assessment, which is called FastBridge. FastBridge has assessments in early reading, early math, and in reading that we're using to look again where are kids falling, and it's getting into more individual and specific skills to give us more information. So once we've identified students that need those Tier 2 targeted interventions, again, this is more of a specialized intervention for at-risk students. It's typically done in small groups. It can be done by classroom teachers, but we also have our math specialists, we have our reading specialists to be able to help to support those as well. And those are designed really specifically to supplement and support as well as enhance our Tier 1 instruction that I just talked about. But again, it's also focusing on some of those targeted skills that we've identified students may need. So the time and the amount of time that students are receiving those interventions is determined and based on specific needs. It can be, again, just as I shared, it can be provided by a classroom teacher, reading specialist, math specialist, and we do have a bilingual interventionist as well to help to provide that. In the behavior side, we're also looking at things like check-in, check-out, which is part of PBIS, and then social academic instructional groups. So when we're talking about Tier 3, remember that was 1 to 5% of our students that we're looking at here. And so in there, that's really more individualized, and it is increased time and intensity from what students are receiving in Tier 1 and Tier 2. So we're finding more opportunities, more time for students to get, typically they're getting pulled in order to receive those Tier 3 that Tier 3 intervention. It's not provided by their classroom teacher. It's individualized, and then there's progress monitoring that's going on in order to track how students are doing within those interventions. And that progress monitoring is so regular that it's either weekly or biweekly. In addition, there's social work groups, outside referrals, and individual problem solving. So again, we're really looking at how are we targeting and supporting our students. So I'm going to go to the other end of the continuum, right? So all those interventions I was talking about were for things that it's really for students who are struggling and need some more remediation. On that extension end, we're also providing extension within that Tier 1. So when we're thinking about core, it's also during that intervention time that's identified within the schools. Teachers are pulling students for small group. They're pulling students to focus on if a student already understands and is reaching mastery, how can I continue to extend their thinking? And they're using most of the time small group instruction to meet the needs and extend those grade level skills. So extension is a little bit different, or a lot different, than acceleration. So acceleration, we have a couple different layers of this. So I'm going to talk first about early entrance. So as you know from policies that you just approved, one of those policies had to do with early entrance. And so parents can request for students to apply for early entrance to either kindergarten or first grade. So for example, and the most common is if a child is turning 5 after that September 1st deadline, then they will request possibly for that student to attend kindergarten early. We do have a date that this child still has to turn 5 by. It can't be a whole year, right? They can't be turning 5 on August 30th the following year. So it's December 31st, but they need to request that by April 15th. When they request that, we then have the parent fill out a survey for us to give us a little bit more information. If the child has attended preschool, they give us the preschool teacher's information as well, so we can contact that teacher to get more information. And then we assess the student in literacy and math. Based on those assessment results, it will indicate if the student is indicated in a very superior range on all of those assessments compared to their peers, then they can enter kindergarten a year early. The same is true then for first grade as well. Our criteria is very similar to the districts that are surrounding us. And then once you pass kindergarten and first grade, what happens? What is our acceleration? So currently, the way it's been working is that, again, parents have to request that. It's not something that we've been identifying students. And so as we've had some requests, what we've done is we've looked at their NWA results. We've looked at where do students fall. And again, if they are indicating very superior range, then we've given some further assessment. So what we've done is we've looked at what grade level then are they going to be looking to skip or to accelerate beyond. So for example, if we have a first grader that the request was to attend a third grade math the following year instead of second grade math, then what we do is we'll give an end of year second grade assessment to look at what does mastery look like from the second grade skills, right? We don't want them to miss out on an entire year of learning and not have an overall understanding. They don't have to have complete mastery of every single one of those skills, but we don't want to miss out on having some understanding of those skills to then not be successful. In addition, it could be both literacy and math. It could be just math, just literacy. And again, so if the results are indicating a very superior range as compared to their peers, then we have had some situations where we've accelerated students. Our plan is then for us to now be looking at, as I shared currently, right now it has been that it has to be parent request. We are looking for next school year to start looking at more of a formal process for that, where we're also identifying some students that may be ready for that as well. And that's all I have on meeting the needs. So what questions can I answer?
Dr. Gluck, you must have known I forgot to ask a question. We were on policies. It's like I couldn't understand my own scribble, but you brought it back. I was going to, let it die on the vine, but you touched on it, so I feel safe bringing it back up. So I actually had two questions, but one with regards to the policy, I think that was 6-130 for the program for the gifted. And so I know that we don't formally have one, but it was my understanding like the 6135, the app was kind of like what we use in lieu of having that formal program. Based on what you just said in terms of looking at having more clearly defined process and criteria, is that something that we're looking to get back? I know some prior public comments that has come up before, right? And is that the end game, to get back to having a program for the gifted? And then my secondary comment to that is, and if so, like what would the cost be? Because I think that was like the big differentiator.
Yeah.
So
I think that's part of what we're looking at, right? We want to look at what are our processes, how do we want to help to support students. There is research lots of different research both ways about having a specific gifted program and identifying students at a certain age. Accelerated programs often allow us to actually tap into more students and be able to provide support. So looking at what does that look like, and really having conversation about what is best practice and how are we going to best meet the needs of our students within our district. We also want to be proactive, and if students are ready for something deeper or looking at that acceleration, we want to proactively identify that and not wait for parents to be requesting it.
Yeah. And when I think about gifted, and this, just could be a learning opportunity for me, at least as I understand it in a traditional way, gifted is like, you have students that like are in the 90th or 95th percentile, like, across multiple spectrums. I like the flexibility of this accelerated placement program because you may have students from an ELA standpoint that's like 95th percentile, right? But may not be as strong in math, right?
Correct.
And so I do like the flexibility that has.
Yeah, and I've been looking at what a lot of our surrounding districts do as well, and many have moved in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then my last question.
Yeah.
When you had up the tier, I like that visual, by the way. When you had that up, and so I know you referenced like NWEA, like so the standardized testing, and I was just curious, is this overlaid with or shared with like pupil services as an example to kind of layer on over top of it to see if there's any intersectionality?
Yeah, so RTI was actually created to be a proactive step before special education to help to see if we provide supports for students. Does that give enough support so then they don't necessarily need to move into a specialized program or have an IEP? If a student is, one, not successful over time, then we're going to look at that piece. And then in addition, when we're talking about, and I'm going to call it problem solving, but it's really looking at how do we best support students. There are teams at every school that is made up of pupil services as well as classroom teachers to be able to help have those conversations and look at all of that data. We're having regular data conversations right now 3 times a year that is made up of mixed staff at every building related to that, to ensure that we're doing exactly what you're talking about. It's overlaying to make sure we're providing the best supports for all of our students.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I wanted to add on to something that Tamika mentioned and make sure that I've got it right in my head, because I think I had the same question and I think you answered it. But I was thinking of actually our parent who came and gave public comment as well, and the intersectionality that she talked about amongst students who do tend to place in that superior category, but also have an element of neurodivergence. And so I think that's what you were trying to get at as well. Like, what's the combination of services that both acknowledges maybe the academic need for academic acceleration along with supports needed for not necessarily behavioral. That's why the triangle, I wasn't sure where that fit because the behavioral kind of threw me off. I was thinking less behavioral and more social, emotional, or executive.
So that's really what that side is talking about. It's called behavioral, but it's looking at
academic stuff.
It is, exactly.
And that answered it for me, thank you.
And then I think there's a piece that you're bringing up that I think is important to think about, and that's the continuum, right, of support that we provide service. And so I think about like tier one's kind of in the middle of that. That's our core, but it really goes to both ends, right? So we have our supports that are providing for students that need remediation or special education services, but then we also have on the other end anything that for our students who need acceleration or extension or any supports that they need. So think about it, I guess, as a continuum of support. And so students can get anything from in between there. And you may have a student that qualifies for special education that still is going to be getting extension on that other end.
Thank you.
When you were talking about interventions, you were talking about doing the fortification of foundational skills for some who needed it. And it got me thinking back to the pandemic when we had the concern, everyone had the concern, right? Learning loss was the hot topic of the day. I guess my question then really is, as you think about the subsequent scaffolding of skills and concepts, is there any like common wisdom that's been congealing in the industry or in the field about when is it time to look again at, we've had our first normal school year since 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
It might be too early to start looking at, how are we recovering from that? So if you could just talk to me a little bit about what is it, how are people thinking of that question and the answer to that question?
Yeah, so there have already been some studies that have started to be done related to that, and it's really about, I'm going to go back to normal. This is our new normal, right? And so what a lot of those studies are showing is we're going to have many years where we're trying to recover from that, and there are students who have some pretty significant gaps, and we know that, and that's not just here in our district, that's nationwide. And so thinking about how are we going to be really intentional in our classrooms when we're teaching, and that's one of the things that, so Dr. Glickman talked about our leadership retreat, or our leadership meeting yesterday, and that's one of the things that, that's leading us to talk about as we're creating goals for next year around how are we being really intentional and what we're doing to provide professional learning for our staff, to be able to support the needs of our students, but what are we also doing to be intentional about identifying student needs and helping students to grow. And so one of the things that we talked about yesterday was the difference between proficiency and growth. And when you look at growth, it's almost more important right now than looking at proficiency, because we have students that need to make 2 years growth in order to close those gaps. So it's the research is starting and the studies are starting to be done, but it's not something that's going to be overnight. It's definitely going to be several years in the making.
And it seems to me that the group of kids affected by this is, you didn't even need to be a kindergartner
right.
during the pandemic. Even preschoolers, they didn't learn the socialization skills and other base skills to be able to excel academically. So that ripple is going to be felt for a long time, I'm afraid.
It is, and I think, so one of the things, and I think we've talked about this already here, but when we're talking about that implementation of the SEL coach, that's part of what that work is going to be, right? So we've talked about having class meetings at K4 where we're intentionally and explicitly teaching skills and starting to have some of those conversations with our students to then talk about how does that impact your learning and how do we then embed that in their learning? Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that brings us to topics for future agenda items.
Yeah. Well, we won't be back together until July 19th. Feels like a long time away, huh? And at that time, the administration will be bringing an update on our equity action plan. As I mentioned earlier, we will update our strategic goals with new action steps. I believe there'll be a presentation regarding sustainability materials from a contact that Christy Miller has, but I don't know the details of that yet. The board has indicated an interest in talking about having students on the Board of Education in some way. I've done what I can to gather information from other school districts, and I wonder if any of our board members might be able to do the same prior to that meeting, and in case you happen to know other board members in other districts that are doing something like that, that might be helpful in that conversation. And we're intending to bring the contract of a new director of operations and maintenance. We are beginning that interview process soon, and we should be having it all wrapped up and ready with the recommendation the 19th of July. And that's it. I do want to just comment as I think about the fact that this is our last board meeting of the 22-23 school year, that I just want to thank our board for really robust conversation about some really important topics. I want to thank our administrators for consistently providing the board with amazing information. I want to comment that a long time ago, I worked in a school district where the superintendent used to say, "Don't teach the board. The board doesn't want to be taught." And I never really understood that, and I don't believe that. I believe our board absolutely wants to know exactly what we're doing in the school district in order to be able to make informed decisions. And so you have hired wonderful people who can provide that information to you, and you're constantly asking the right questions that help to push us think differently about things. So thank you for all of that. I am so excited about the year ahead. Lots more to come.
Well, I think all of us as board members would echo the same feelings going back in the other direction. And the leadership team and the staff and the teachers and the families and the coaches and the maintenance staff and everybody involved in running the district and making it a safe place for all of our students who go here and for any future families that join the district. So thank you all. We don't have any public comments, I'm assuming, down there? No, not on the, right. And closed session, we don't have a closed session. Okay. All right, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:58 p.m.
Make that motion.
I'll second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye.